Chosen one, this is not an accident. This message was always meant to find you. You didn't stumble here by chance. You are divinely guided, drawn in by something deeper than curiosity, because your spirit knows something is about to change. Something profound, something sacred. And the shift begins tonight. If you've ever felt the stirring within your soul, if you've ever sensed that the world you see isn't all there is, then this is for you. Welcome home. You are not alone. You are never meant to blend in. You are meant to rise. Before we go further, I invite you to join this journey with boldness. Subscribe to Bible Peak. Now this is a home for the called, the awakened, the chosen. And comment below, I receive my divine power from God. Let that be your loud and clear declaration, your commitment to walk in the strength, clarity, and purpose that has always been yours. Now hear this: there are moments in life when heaven draws so near that the air feels electric. When time seems to pause and the veil between this world and the unseen becomes paper thin. Tonight, at exactly 3:00 a.m., one of those sacred moments will unfold. This is not superstition. This is not myth. This is divine timing. And your spirit has already felt it. Have you noticed how some nights you wake up for no reason? Eyes wide open, mind alert, heart pounding. That's not insomnia. That's invitation. The spiritual realm has been trying to reach you, to awaken you, to prepare you for this very hour. Throughout history, prophets, warriors, mystics, those chosen by God, have received revelation in the hours when the world is asleep. Why? Because it's in the stillness that heaven speaks. It's in the silence that your soul becomes most receptive. At 3:00 a.m., the distractions fade, the noise is gone, and the frequency of the divine grows louder. Tonight, that frequency will align with you. You've walked through shadows. You've endured seasons of silence. You've questioned your path, your worth, your strength. But here, you are still standing, still searching. That's because you've been called, marked, chosen, and tonight, God is sending a message directly to your soul. It will not be in thunder or lightning. It will not be dramatic. It will be holy, gentle, whispered through the Spirit. Yet it will shake everything inside of you. This 3:00 a.m. hour has been ordained for your awakening. The number 3 is no coincidence. It is a holy number, a symbol of divine completeness. The Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. At 3:00 a.m., you step into alignment with heaven's design. The timing isn't random. It's prophetic. There is something heaven wants to reveal to you tonight, answers you've prayed for, clarity you've longed for, direction you've begged to receive. Tonight is the unlocking. You might feel it in your body tingling, warmth, peace. You might sense it in your atmosphere, a presence, a stillness, a soft nudge to sit in silence. Or you may be given dreams that feel more real than waking life. These are not coincidences. These are spiritual downloads. This moment is a spiritual crossroad. You've arrived here because your preparation is complete. Your wilderness season is coming to an end. Your training, your refining, your isolation, it's all been leading to this. At 3:00 a.m., you will be given the next set of instructions, the next phase of your calling. But to receive it, you must be present, spiritually awake, emotionally open, mentally quiet. Your soul must be ready to listen not to the world, but to God. Prepare your space. Turn off the noise. Set your intention. Tonight is not like other nights. This is a divine appointment. Do you wonder why you've been feeling restless? Why the same messages keep repeating in your dreams, your conversations, your thoughts? That's because God has been aligning you, pulling you away from the familiar, pushing you toward the supernatural. The time has come for activation. You've been in waiting, in wilderness, in wondering. But tonight is the beginning of the shift. You are about to move with clarity, with courage, and with anointing. The world has told you to doubt, to shrink, to play small. But heaven says otherwise. Heaven calls you powerful, purposed, protected, chosen, and at 3:00 a.m., that truth will become undeniable. Something will awaken in you. Something will be remembered. You will feel it not as a thought, but as a knowing. The kind of knowing that doesn't need proof. Because your spirit will recognize the voice of your Creator. It's not just a change in energy. It's a change in identity. What happens at 3:00 a.m. isn't meant to entertain. It's meant to equip, to prepare you to step into rooms you once feared, to speak with authority you didn't think you had, to walk in favor that confuses those who overlooked you. This moment marks the end of wandering and the beginning of divine direction. No more asking for permission. No more waiting for signs. You are the sign. You are the message. And tonight, that truth will be sealed in your spirit. So I ask you, again, will you be ready? Will you be still enough to hear Him? Will you be bold enough to receive? Chosen one, the gates of heaven are opening tonight. Not for everyone, but for those who are ready. And you, yes you, have been chosen to receive. Prepare your heart, clear your space, and meet God at 3:00 a.m. This is not just a moment. This is the moment your life begins again. There is something profoundly sacred about the early morning hours. Not just because they are quiet, but because they are untouched. The world has not yet placed its demands on your mind. Your phone isn't buzzing. Expectations haven't started pressing. And in that stillness, something ancient and holy takes shape. The voice of the Spirit becomes unmistakable for the chosen ones. The 3:00 a.m. hour isn't just symbolic. It's a portal of alignment. It's when God awakens you not to interrupt your rest, but to stir your purpose. Because when the natural world sleeps, the spiritual world speaks. Throughout the Bible, many of the greatest encounters with God happened in stillness. Elijah heard Him not in the wind or the fire, but in a gentle whisper. Jacob wrestled with God in the night. Samuel was called while the temple was still. These moments weren't random. They were intentionally timed. Because spiritual sensitivity heightens when everything else is quiet, the chosen often find themselves stirred from sleep at these odd hours. Not because they drank too much coffee or are anxious, but because their spirit is active. When others close their eyes and drift, the chosen feel a pull, a soft inner voice urging them to rise, to pay attention, to listen. At first, it might feel inconvenient, but soon it becomes familiar. It becomes sacred. The 3:00 a.m. hour is often referred to by spiritual scholars and prophetic voices as the watch hour, a time when the veil is thinnest and spiritual activity intensifies. In the natural, it's the darkest hour of the night, but in the spirit, it is one of the brightest. The world is asleep, but heaven is awake. And the Father waits to commune with His children who are sensitive enough to feel the call. For those walking in their calling, or even just beginning to sense it, this is the hour of impartation. Not in loud declarations, but in divine downloads. Sometimes it comes through visions. Other times, through a deep impression in the heart. And sometimes, it's simply peace that makes no sense, wrapping around your soul like a blanket, confirming you are not alone. When God begins waking you consistently at this hour, it's not a random occurrence. It's an invitation. He is calling you deeper. You're being summoned to receive what cannot be spoken during the chaos of your day, to receive insight, warning, strategy, healing, because some revelations can only be given in the stillness. Some transformations only begin in the quiet for many chosen ones. This hour becomes their place of surrender, not a performance, not a time to impress God with fancy words, but a moment to sit, to breathe, to open your hands and say, "Lord, I'm listening," and often, that's when the shift begins. Not in fireworks, but in awareness. You begin to notice the patterns, how the same thoughts return during those hours, how you suddenly remember specific people, situations, scriptures. These are not coincidences. They are prompts. When God begins highlighting something in the quiet, it's a signal that He wants you to see it through spiritual eyes. And if you remain consistent, something begins to change, not just in the atmosphere, but in you. Your perspective shifts. Your anxiety lessens. Your priorities realign. You start to recognize His whispers during the day because you've trained your ear in the night. Isaiah 52:4 says, "He wakens me morning by morning, wakens my ear to listen." Like one being instructed, this is the mark of the chosen. They are teachable, not in a classroom, but in the quiet of obedience. They learn not from popularity, but from presence. They rise when it's hard. They listen when it's inconvenient. And because of that, they hear what others miss. The world teaches hustle. Heaven teaches stillness. And for the chosen, stillness is never passive. It is active alignment. It is how power is received. Not power over people, but power over confusion. Power over fear. Power over distraction. In this hour, chosen ones also receive clarity about things that were once cloudy. What used to confuse them becomes simple. Questions begin to resolve, not always with full answers, but with peace. And that peace becomes a compass. It begins to guide decisions. It quiets the need to rush. It dissolves the need to be validated, because in this hour, you're reminded of who you are, not based on achievements, but on your identity as God's own. It's also during this time that spiritual warfare becomes more noticeable. For many chosen ones, nighttime has not always been peaceful. There have been battles, dreams that feel dark, sleep that's constantly interrupted, or feelings of heaviness that have no source. This is not random either. The enemy knows that if he can disturb your night, he can disorient your day. But the more you respond to the divine wake-up call, the more authority you begin to carry. Soon, the very hour that once brought discomfort becomes a place of peace. You no longer fear the night you commanded. You begin to take back what was stolen. You pray with boldness. You declare truth in the darkness. You praise with no music, and yet heaven responds. This is what happens when the chosen ones embrace their timing. They stop seeing early waking as a curse and start treating it like a sacred meeting. They get up not because they have to, but because they get to. Because they know God has something to say. In these holy moments, you may not always feel a strong emotional wave. Some nights may be quiet, still, simple, but don't underestimate the silence. Sometimes God is doing the deepest work in the stillness, rewiring thoughts, softening your heart, healing your memories, strengthening your resolve. You begin to walk differently, think differently, carry yourself differently, not because anything visible has changed, but because something inside you has aligned. The 3:00 a.m. hour becomes your altar, a place of exchange. You bring your worry, and God gives you wisdom. You bring your exhaustion, and He gives you strength. You bring your questions, and He gives you quiet assurance. Not always with words, but with presence. And that presence, it stays with you. You carry it into your conversations, your work, your relationships. People begin to sense something different about you. Not louder, not holier than thou, just rooted, peaceful, clear. This is the fruit of communion. And it always begins in the unseen. The moment you respond to the divine call at 3:00 a.m., something inside of you shifts permanently. It's not always dramatic, but it is always deep. You don't return to life the same way. The restlessness that once ruled your days begins to fade. The confusion that once clouded your thoughts starts to lift. And in its place, you begin to feel something rare in this world, divine clarity. But clarity is not the end. It is the beginning. Because once God reveals something to you in the secret place, you are now responsible for carrying that revelation into the visible world. What he whispered in the dark must now be walked out in the light. And that's where the chosen truly begin to separate themselves, not just in receiving, but in responding. James 1:22 says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. This is the mark of maturity." The chosen are not just hearers, they are doers. They don't collect divine words like trophies. They build with them, brick by brick, step by step. They turn revelation into responsibility after receiving insight. During those sacred early hours, you will begin to feel a gentle prompting throughout your day, a soft nudge to reach out to someone, an idea that won't let you go, a warning that makes you pause, a dream that lingers long after you've woken. These are not distractions. These are the echoes of heaven. You begin to live with spiritual awareness. You start noticing patterns you ignored before. Words carry more weight. Conversations feel more intentional. You're no longer moving aimlessly, you're being led. Every step starts to feel like obedience, not obligation. And this obedience brings favor. Not the kind that makes headlines, but the kind that moves mountains behind the scenes. Opportunities that others chase begin to find you. People are drawn to your peace. Doors open without striving. Not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. Psalm 37:23 says, "The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him." Your steps become firm. Not because you see the whole path, but because you trust the one guiding it. The chosen don't always have the full picture, but they walk anyway. Because once you've heard the voice of God in the stillness, you don't need constant confirmation. His whisper becomes your compass. His presence becomes your map. This kind of faith makes you unshakable. Storms may come, but you no longer panic. You've seen too much. You've heard too much. You've been called too clearly. And because of that, your confidence is no longer tied to circumstances, it's anchored in truth. And with that confidence comes responsibility. You begin to feel the weight of your assignment, not in a burdensome way, but in a holy way. You start recognizing that your words carry power, that your time is sacred, that your life is not random, it is prophetic. You're not here to blend in. You are here to release something, to shift atmospheres, to break generational cycles, to plant seeds in hearts that are ready, to speak light into darkness, to bring heaven into homes, conversations, workplaces, and nations. But with that calling comes the need for discipline, because the enemy doesn't fight what doesn't threaten him. And once you begin walking in divine instruction, resistance often increases. Distractions will come dressed as opportunities. Old habits will try to resurface. People from your past may return. Not every test looks like trouble. Some look like comfort. The chosen learn to discern the difference. 1 Peter 5-8 warns us, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. This is why post-revelation seasons require heightened awareness. After the 3 o'clock a.m. call, the enemy knows something has shifted in you. You are no longer asleep. You are no longer passive. You are walking in power. And that makes you a target, but you are not alone. You have been equipped. The clarity you received is your weapon. The peace you carry is your armor. The word spoken over you is your shield. You fight not from fear, but from victory, and victory requires strategy. Chosen ones understand this. They begin to build spiritual routines that reinforce their assignment. They carve out time for prayer, not as a task, but as a lifeline. They study the word not to impress, but to understand their authority. They surround themselves with people who challenge them to grow, not people who keep them comfortable. They start speaking differently, declaring things into existence, praying from a place of power, not begging, prophesying over their day, commanding peace over their homes, binding fear, loosing favor. This is what happens when you've been with God. You stop playing small. And when challenges come, you don't run, you stand. Not because you're fearless, but because you're full. You've been filled in the early hours. You've been reminded of who you are. You've heard your name spoken by the creator of the universe. And once you've heard that, no lie can stick to you. You start expecting breakthrough, not as a maybe, but as a guarantee. You start seeing delays as preparation, not denial. You interpret silence not as absence, but as incubation. You begin to speak in faith, act in confidence, and live in purpose. This is life after revelation. A life of continual alignment, constant refinement, and unwavering obedience. You're no longer surviving, you're building. Not for applause, but for legacy. Not for validation, but for the glory of the one who called you. Once the chosen one steps into the flow of divine clarity, the real journey begins not just to walk in purpose for a moment, but to live in it continually. To not just experience visitation, but to host God's presence. You see, the most powerful lives are not built on spiritual highs. They are built on consistent obedience, rooted in the secret place, anchored by discipline, and fueled by trust. This is where chosen ones begin to separate from the crowd, not because they are better, but because they are consistent. They understand that the flame they received in the quiet hours must be protected in the noise of the day. That the clarity they gained at 3 o'clock a.m. must be guarded from the confusion that awaits at 3 o'clock p.m. Romans 12:11 encourages us. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. Serving the Lord, the instruction is clear: keep your fire burning. And to do that, chosen ones begin to structure their lives differently. They are intentional with their energy, careful with their time, and discerning with their connections. Every decision becomes spiritual. Every relationship is filtered through purpose. Every opportunity is examined through prayer. You don't need to explain this shift to everyone. Some won't understand. Some will say, "You've changed," and they're right. You've changed alignment. You've changed atmospheres. You've moved from trying to fit into standing firm in your calling. And that will confuse those still chasing approval, but you are not called to be understood. You are called to be obedient. So you simplify. You strip away what no longer serves your soul. You stop attending to things that drain you spiritually. You begin guarding your morning hours with reverence. You turn your nights into sanctuaries. You make room every day for the one who meets you in the stillness. You might not always feel the fire burning with the same intensity as that first night, But faith is not about feeling, it's about faithfulness. The flame is still there, steady and alive, even when the emotions quiet down. Your walk is no longer based on spiritual adrenaline. It is grounded in spiritual maturity. Psalm 16:8 says, I keep my eyes always on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken, and so you keep your eyes forward. You walk through open doors with boldness and close others with peace. You take the insights from the secret place and build something lasting with them. A life, a legacy, a trail for others to follow, because what you received wasn't just for you. It was for others waiting to wake up, for those still tossing and turning in their own spiritual slumber. You become the living reminder that purpose is possible, that clarity is available, that God still speaks, and yes, there will be days you're tempted to drift, days where the noise gets loud and your spirit feels distant. But you've been trained for this. You've been awakened too deeply to go back to sleep. You recognize the signs now, the emotional clutter, the spiritual fog, the distractions disguised as blessings. And when you see them, you return to the place of alignment. That's the secret of the chosen. They return quickly. They don't live in guilt. They live in grace. When they wander, they recalibrate. When they fall, they rise again. They don't fake perfection. They pursue presence, and they understand that sustaining the fire means feeding it. Through worship, through the word, through silence, through surrender. They don't wait until crisis hits. They stay filled daily. Because chosen ones don't just prepare for battle when the war starts. They live prepared. They speak life over their days before they begin. They declare truth over their mind when lies try to creep in. They remind themselves who they are: chosen, appointed, empowered. And most importantly, they remind themselves whose they are. John 15:5 says, I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing, so they remain. Not occasionally, but daily. Not emotionally, but intentionally. And as they remain, they bear fruit. Fruit that lasts. Fruit that multiplies. Fruit that feeds others who are starving for hope. Truth and direction. You begin to see your life as ministry, even if you never stand behind a pulpit. Your presence becomes a sermon. Your peace becomes a message. Your discipline becomes a testimony. You don't need a title to carry authority. You've been marked by God, and the fruit of that marking speaks louder than any nameplate. And so, you walk with head high, spirit open, and feet steady. You move with grace. You love deeply. You forgive quickly. You discern sharply. You give generously. And you protect what you've built not with fear, but with wisdom. Because you remember the moment that woke you up. You remember what God said when the world was quiet. And you refuse to forget. This is the journey of the chosen. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it. The fire that started in the night will grow into a wildfire that touches everyone you encounter. And though it began in stillness, it will echo in eternity. Stay lit. Stay aligned. Stay obedient. You are chosen, you are awake, and you are unstoppable in the hands of God.